China, which had been merely observing the development of the war between the US and Iran all this time, unexpectedly proposed a way out of this war, but is asking Donald Trump for something in return. The point is that on May 14 and 15, Donald Trump will arrive in Beijing to meet with Xi Jinping, but someone has already beaten him to it. Today, May 6, the head of Iran's diplomatic service, Abbas Araghchi, visited Beijing. And this visit drew attention to a key question. Can China take on the role of peacemaker in the American-Iranian conflict? And now China is already making it clear that it is ready to help Donald Trump end this war and even come out to some extent as a winner from this confrontation. But Xi Jinping is demanding quite a high price for such a service, and that's what we're going to discuss now. My name is Araghchi Pechiy. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, please subscribe to this channel, give it a like, and leave any comment under this video. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video, or by using the QR code on your screens, or through sponsorship on the platform. In general, if you find this episode interesting and useful, at the end of the episode I will ask you to support the work of our YouTube channel with your donations. So, today, on May 6th, the head of Iranian diplomacy, Abbas Araghchi, arrived in Beijing, and against this background, representatives of the White House are insisting that China use its influence on Iran to unblock the Strait of Hormuz. The United States Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, publicly called on Beijing to use the visit of Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, to China to persuade Tehran to ease its control over this important waterway. The U.S. Secretary of State added that China has suffered from Iran's de facto closure of the Strait of Hormuz more than the United States. China's export-based economy depends on transportation through the Strait of Hormuz. And Marco Rubio added that it is in China's interest for Iran to stop blocking the Strait of Hormuz. Here, jumping ahead a bit, I'll add that China actually built up quite large oil reserves at home before this war. And according to experts' estimates, they can sit calmly for more than half a year and not worry at all about the drop in oil exports. No problem at all. And here's something interesting, because one of the diplomats told the Associated Press that the US is making serious efforts to persuade China to abstain from vetoing a resolution in the UN Security Council supported by Washington, which is aimed at unblocking the Hormuz Strait and condemning Iran's actions. I should note here that China and Russia already blocked the previous resolution on the Hormuz Strait last month, stating that it goes too far and does not condemn the US and Israel for the strikes that started this war. Moreover, today China once again reiterated that it considers the war by the US and Israel against Iran to be illegal. In addition to this, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent stated on Monday, May 4th, that Iran will be one of the priority issues at the meeting between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. And this simply trapped Donald Trump, because I would like to point out that in fact this meeting was originally planned for signing some kind of super profitable trade agreement for America. Before the war in Iran, the priority issue was not the Middle East, but the signing of a trade deal. But now that issue has been pushed aside, and now the focus is on something else. It has already become known that it was China, by the way, that forced Iran to agree to a ceasefire in early April. Even Donald Trump himself stated that, in his opinion, China played a certain role in encouraging Iran to agree to the fragile truce. And now the Trump administration believes that China can make more efforts to unblock the Strait of Hormuz. But on the other hand, the US government claims that China has long supported Iran's ballistic missile program and supplies Tehran with dual-use industrial components that can be used to produce missiles. But last month, after the US military essentially seized a container ship that was carrying chemicals for making rocket fuel in Iran, Trump stated that after that Xi Jinping agreed not to supply weapons to Iran. With this statement, there were also reports that Beijing was considering transferring weapons to Tehran. Therefore, it turns out that it is China that determines how Iran will behave. Now Beijing, at least on paper, is the obvious candidate to take over the role of mediator and chief negotiator. China has long been a close diplomatic and economic partner. Music plays. This commitment is based on shared tensions with the US and the pursuit of cheap oil. But at the same time, China has an open line of communication with Washington, and it has direct access to Donald Trump during his meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping as early as next week. In other words, it's a perfect position. It was probably this moment that prompted Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi to visit Beijing and meet there with his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi. Music is playing. There is hope that Beijing, quote, will be able to prevent violations of international peace and security. And Trump will most likely also raise the issue of the conflict with Xi Jinping. During his anticipated trip, which was originally supposed to be dedicated to economic competition between the two powers but is now overshadowed by the war with Iran, Chinese officials themselves have been calling for a ceasefire for several weeks and have positioned Beijing as a potential mediator in the peace process, including Xi Jinping. Last month, he unveiled a general 4-point proposal for a peaceful settlement in the Middle East. The very fact that Xi Jinping managed to win over both sides within a week is already a victory for him, as he seeks to strengthen China's role as a global power. Just imagine the picture. China is playing peacemaker, or say, helping to broker a peace agreement between the US and Iran, amid Trump's claims that Iran would soon surrender and raise the white flag. Negotiations with an increasingly unpopular US president bogged down in a long-term war and looking for easy victories are probably not an unwelcome position for Xi Jinping, you know. No, on the contrary, this is actually very beneficial for Xi Jinping because the trade deal, let me repeat, has already been postponed. It's been pushed to the background. That's it. There's no need to talk about it anymore. And in fact, you can, excuse me, keep postponing this issue like this. And that's how Donald Trump's term will end. And there won't be a trade agreement. China is absolutely fine with that. Moreover, at the moment, Xi Jinping is actually ready to help Iran hold out for at least a few more weeks in this war before making a deal with Trump. So, if Trump doesn't do something good for China, China can help Iran, and Iran will keep holding out for a month, 2 months, even 3 months. And the current situation may give China a unique opportunity to benefit from the confrontation ahead of what will likely be a tough, even brutal midterm election for Donald Trump, since Trump is eager to show American voters tangible victories, such as large purchases by China of American agricultural products and Boeing airplanes. That was about the trade deal, but now these issues are set aside. And Xi Jinping understands that, okay, if Trump wants to talk about this, for example, then it's necessary to talk about Iran, and for Trump to admit that without Xi Jinping, he can't resolve this war. On the other hand, it's actually beneficial for China that the United States is making Iran completely dependent on Beijing, just like what happened with Russia, which has become such a pitiful vassal of China. Currently, Russia is just an empty shell without China. It's nothing. Before Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, at least there was some kind of partnership between Russia and China. Now Russia is just a cheap appendage to China. China can do whatever it wants with these unwashed Russians. It's obvious that after the war, Iran's dependence on China will remain. Even during the war, Chinese purchases of Iranian oil make up more than 90% of Iran's exports. And thus, they give China significant economic leverage over Iran. And here's where it gets interesting. Last month, in April, Washington blacklisted a major Chinese petrochemical company. According to the US Treasury, it was a major buyer of Iranian oil. These were tough sanctions imposed because this company was buying Iranian oil. This is the largest Chinese oil refinery to ever come under American sanctions. In response, Beijing was not intimidated by these sanctions. On the contrary, in Beijing, companies across China were ordered not to comply with the sanctions against this company and 4 others that were blacklisted by the US. In Beijing, they said, don't be afraid, just ignore these sanctions altogether. Keep cooperating, we've got your back if anything comes up. And now it's obvious that China can either prolong this war by supporting Iran or quickly end it by putting pressure on Iran itself. And what Xi Jinping will choose now depends on what Donald Trump offers him next week. I'll leave it at that. Your opinion, your conclusions, write in the comments below. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation or a paid channel membership using the links and details in the description of this video, or by using the QR code on your screens. I would be grateful for any support from you. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechiy News. The link is in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.